My name is Mahmoudi. I am studying for a PhD in development studies at the Center of Development Studies, and I'm studying technological marginalization amongst vulnerable migrant populations of the city. I basically am interested in how technologies have come to replace certain social services and social provisions traditionally governed by the state, and sometimes governed by private entities, but increasingly there's been a shift into using apps and other digital, supposedly social technologies to replace these social services. And I'm looking into how these technologies might sometimes identify very crucial human elements and community reliance on an inefficiency that is to be overcome via these technologies. And that concerns me because these can be potentially reproducing of social, economic, and political inequalities that have otherwise been fought for in this fraught space that is the city. So that's a really interesting question because the literature that currently exists on technology happens to be very techno-optimistic, and especially in the context of for social good. So there's a sea of literature that's kind of emerging now, like within the past year, that is making the argument for these technologies as controlling. So what you might have seen as otherwise technologies for social good, technologies that cater to communities, technologies that cater to some sort of social change, easier access to job, flexible hours, etc. They're often controlling in the way that they police and monitor and surveil, and sometimes also try and control populations into certain behaviors that are invariably individualistic. What we might find is that it's difficult to produce what the literature in the past has referred to as liberation technologies. Liberation technologies are often spoken to as some form of technology that can undercut the state or undercut corporations or undercut inequality. But I think that's going too far because these technologies are being produced within a certain context. So technologies that purport to remedy inequality are often created in highly neoliberal capitalist systems in which they depend on a profit margin. And unless these technologies are disruptive, so to speak, and unless they're scalable, then they won't see an investment and they won't come to reality, so to speak. And so the technology that caters to a smaller population and to the very particular needs of communities are often not seen as profitable and therefore are given up on. And so I think the best we can do, though, and what we would maybe benefit from is to look at technologies of resistance. And these aren't often the smartest technologies in the way that we understand smart technologies. They aren't often the technologies that are the most advanced or that are most available on your phone, but they may be anything from a phone number, a hotline that connects someone who has been taken into custody by the police with a paralegal within 45 seconds. It might be a website that helps you redistribute food within a community in which there are invariably large numbers of poor people. It might be technologies that help you conduct anti-surveillance, so protect yourself against surveilling forces through VPNs or through using messaging services that are encrypted. And it might also be social practices that are just not technological in the way that we think of technology. And it's that there's a sea of technologies there that are not being hailed as technologies that could potentially help resist the forces of inequality. And I think that's something that we need to look at deeper and as things that we need to understand. And these are technologies that are going to potentially help us with some of what we're experiencing in Europe when it comes to access to socioeconomic rights for refugees and migrants. Then on a broader scale, of course, you can draw a historical path to understanding how the city has always relied on migrant laborers in order to be constructed and upon the exclusion across racial and class lines of those migrant laborers. And so there's a constant need, it seems, for this kind of flexible migrant labor and then an exclusion of it, and how actually social technology may be another version of that historical process that has always been occurring.